Scotland. We haven't covered them for a while. But the former Scottish National Party leader Alex Salmond has resigned from the party this week, saying he will clear his name against accusations of sexual harassment that have been made against him. Now, he refutes 2 complaints of harassment and absolutely rejects any suggestion of criminality, adding he was resigning so as to not facilitate opposition attacks on the SNP. Now, Mr Salmond was a member of the Scottish National Party for 45 years, and 20 of them as party leader, and 7 of the First Minister of Scotland. He also currently hosts a show on RT UK, and last week he told RT that someone in the Scottish Government had leaked the charges against him to the tabloids, which was damaging the confidentiality of the proceedings. And he went on to complain the system should be designed so that everyone has a fair shot. The Scottish Government process doesn't do that, he explained, adding that the government has rejected his attorney's proposals of mediation and arbitration, and he's now preparing for a judicial review before the highest court in Scotland, and says he intends to reapply for party membership as soon as he clears his name. I'm not too sure he's going to be able to clear his name. I've got one word to say about Alex Salmond. Dunblane. Yes, you, Mr. Salmond. Now, this is about the US forces in Afghanistan, and the commander of the US forces, General John Nicholson, recently said that America's military strategy, revised a year ago under the Trump administration, is working. At the same time, Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater, currently known as Academy, apparently doesn't share that view and intends to renew his offer to his friend Donald Trump to replace US military forces with private military contractors. Now, despite the differences and any similarities, the military solutions for peace in Afghanistan offered by Nicholson and Prince are both delusional. In saying that the latest US military strategy is working, Nicholson believes the currently military solution is having the effect of advancing us towards reconciliation with the Afghan Taliban, and Prince admits he hasn't spoken yet to the president to renew the request. Meanwhile, Defence Secretary James Mattis and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo both oppose Prince's plan, and the current military strategy may not show results until at least next summer, if then something which may prompt Trump to consider Prince's offer. However, the National Security Advisor John Bolton has strangely been silent on Prince's proposal, and in the coming days, Eric Prince said he intends to launch a media campaign to convince the president to favourably consider his plan of action. My comment on that: perhaps Mr. Prince needs to explain how he feels he and a mercenary group can carry out that particular task when they've had their asses kicked in Yemen, or why he took the contract from the fabled Chinese elders earlier this year and failed at that, or why he failed to become the head of the Black Dragon for North America. We've had enough of war strategies. We don't need to be in Afghanistan. We didn't need to be there in the first place. When I say we, I'm talking about America, the country, and its people. Afghanistan, like Iraq, like Syria, like Vietnam, Guatemala, I could go on for the rest of the night, all 81 countries invaded since World War II, was nothing to do with the safety or protection of the American people, and everything to do with war games by the psychopaths. So I'm hoping Mr. Trump tells the both of them to go away and brings the troops home where they belong. We have enough clowns to deal with in this country without playing games on behalf of criminal elites in others. Australia next, and something that's been highlighted is the suicide attempts and horrifying acts of self-harm that are drawing attention to the suffering of refugee children on Nauru. I hope I've pronounced that right. Nauru. It's a small island. In what has been described as a mental health crisis. Now, this tiny island nation, a site of Australia's controversial offshore processing centre that has long been plagued with allegations of human rights abuses, but a series of damning media reports recently also highlighted a rapidly deteriorating situation for young people. And we are starting to see suicidal behaviour in children as young as 8 and up to 10 years of age. This is according to Louise Newman, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Melbourne, who works with the families and children on the island. She went on to say it's an absolute crisis. Australia intercepts all asylum seekers and refugees who try to reach its shores by boat, and it insists they will never be able to resettle in Australia. So over the years has sent many to privately run processing centres, in inverted commas. We all know what that means. It funds on Nauru and in Papua New Guinea. Now, groups working with families on Nauru paint a brutal picture of life for children on the island. Many have lived most of their life in the detention centre with no idea what their future will be, and the trauma they have endured, coupled with poor and often dangerous conditions, can contribute to the sense of hopelessness. So hope by highlighting that tonight, something or somebody will do something about it. Google, under fire Google, may not last long Google. Now, apparently they've partnered up with MasterCard, the second largest credit card network in the US, to get millions of dollars worth of data on its customers. Oh my. Now, this is according to a report this week. The existence of a clandestine deal between the two marketing giants was first reported on Thursday, citing 4 people with the knowledge of the deal, 3 whom worked on it directly. Now, the agreement, which is bound to stoke new privacy concerns, was the fruit of 4 years of negotiations, and the alleged deal allows Google to link ads that a user clicks to what they buy in stores using their card. They're doing this already, but it's nice it's coming out. Now, if there's a match, Google provides feedback to the advertiser, and the scheme works only if a customer is logged into a Google account and has not switched off Google ad tracking, a rather tricky process that takes several stages to accomplish, and they still keep it on when you ask for it to be removed. Where are we next? New Mexico. The 13-year-old boy who was part of the group taken into custody at a squalid New Mexico compound, which we reported in this show last month, has told FBI agents his mother's boyfriend was training him to conduct jihad against non-believers. And this is according to federal court documents. The boy was among 11 children and 5 adults living at the compound in Taos County when it was raided on August the 3rd by local sheriff deputies who discovered a cache of firearms and the children living without food or clean water. The dead body of a 3-year-old boy was found buried at the site later. Now, initially they faced state charges, and then on Friday, the 5 adults, including a Haitian woman described as the group leader, 35-year-old Janie LaVille, were arrested by the FBI and accused of conspiracy and firearms offences. Now, obviously last week it was reported that the judge had let them off, but on Friday the FBI picked them up again. And in an affidavit filed in support of a criminal complaint, an FBI special agent noted that LaVille's 13-year-old son told investigators that his mother's boyfriend, Siraj Ibn Wahaj, wanted to get an army together and train them for jihad, no doubt at the request of Obama. I kid you not. The boy told agents that Wahaj trained him and another of LaVille's teenage sons in firearms and military techniques, including rapid reloads and hand-to-hand combat, and told them jihad meant killing non-believers on behalf of Allah. And this was all filed in an affidavit in the US District Court in New Mexico. The 13-year-old also told the FBI that his mother believed she received messages from God. Which one? And that he watched her and Wahaj perform supposed exorcism rituals over the 3-year-old boy, including one during which the boy choked and his heart stopped, according to the special agent's affidavit. So as I say, last week when we highlighted that the judge had let them go, which is indicative of the levels of interference, the FBI went and picked them up the following day. I suspect that they won't be coming out of custody anymore. The US military said it made a final decision this week to cancel $300 million in aid to Pakistan, and that had been suspended over Islamabad's perceived failure to take decisive action against militants. And the so-called coalition support funds were part of a broader suspension in aid to Pakistan that was announced by President Donald Trump at the start of the year, when he accused Pakistan of rewarding past assistance with nothing but lies and deceit. The Trump administration says Islamabad is granting safe haven to insurgents who are waging a 17-year-old war in Afghanistan. According to some anyway, the US economy is doing great. Unemployment, they say, is at a near 2-decade low. The stock market is strong. Corporate profits are at record highs. And yet a report out this week finds that almost half of Americans are having trouble for basic needs such as food and housing. No surprise there. The Urban Institute, a Washington think tank, surveyed more than 7,500 adults about their experience about making ends meet, and it found that about 40% of people aged 18 to 64 faced some sort of hardship last year. And according to Michael Cartman, the research associate at the Urban Institute, said it's certainly surprising and disconcerting that so many people are having difficulty meeting their basic needs. We found that a lot of people have to devote much of their income to fixed expenses like rent or healthcare, and if they're hit with a large unexpected expense, they simply can't cover it. Now the stats become deeply more troubling the further you look down. More than 35% of families with at least one working adult reported difficulty meeting at least one basic need last year. Almost a quarter of Americans experienced food insecurity, which is to say they didn't always know if they would be able to eat if they were hungry. Quarter. A staggering 18% faced issues paying medical bills, and nearly the same percentage reported skipping treatment of an ailment because they couldn't afford it, and slightly more than 10% of Americans missed a rental or mortgage payment. 13% couldn't pay utility bills. While much of these economic woes were concentrated among lower income households, the Urban Institute found out that many middle class families also struggled to pay their bills. About 20% of middle class people are having trouble, mostly with healthcare. So you can mask it all you like. The harsh reality on the street it says a different story. California, next, a massive problem to the tune of 129 million dead trees, which is spread across roughly 9 million acres. Now, for comparison, that's 6,500 times the number of trees in Central Park. And this is a spokesperson, according to a spokesperson, Heather Williams, for the Californian Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. Now, in dry, hot times, the record number of decaying ponderosa pines, sugar pines, and other towering species can become kindling for errant sparks, fallen power lines, cigarette butts, and lightning strikes, and also directed energy weapons. Oops. The bumper crop of kindling helps explain why this has been the worst year on record for Californian wildfires. Already more than 876,000 acres have been burned in California, compared to 228,000 last year, and we've still got 4 months left. The what is known as the Mendocino Complex fire now is almost fully contained at more than 459,000 acres, and is the single largest fire on record in state history. The largest fire before that was known as the Thomas Fire, was put out in January of last year, or this year, sorry. That has to stop. Home Secretary in Britain, Sajid Javid, has warned he will not be afraid to take action against tech giants if they do not help to tackle child sexual abuse online. Now, he is demanding companies take more measures or face new legislation. He added that some sites were refusing to take online abuse seriously, and highlighted live streaming of child abuse as a growing problem. He cited Facebook, Google and Microsoft, saying they are committed to tackling the issue, and said that it was his personal mission to tackle online child abuse, adding that he'd been impressed by the progress of the likes of Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter and Apple have made on counter-terrorism. Now I want to see the same level of commitment from these companies and others for child sexual exploitation. And his cabinet colleague last week, Jeremy Hunt, criticised Google for failing to cooperate with the UK over this particular issue. Yeah, no change there. Lawyer and CNN, Clinton News Network analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, has criticised Donald Trump on Tuesday for his attacks on Attorney General Jeff Sessions over the indictments of 2 Republican congressmen, saying the president's comments may be grounds for his impeachment. This tweet alone may be an impeachable offence. And this is such a disgrace, he went on. And he also stated, this is contrary to the traditions of the Department of Justice. Really? It's such an insult to the decent people who work there. Now, although the president has attacked many of his enemies on Twitter before, Toobin said Trump's decision to complain about Sessions and the indictments, as well as their potential effect on the Republican Party in the midterm elections, are a more serious breach of behaviour and an affront to the values of the Justice Department. We'll have more on that later. Company we highlighted a couple of months back, Theranos Inc., the blood testing company accused of perpetrating and lying about their technology. And it led to Silicon Valley's biggest fraud ever. Well, that company will soon cease to exist. In the wake of a high-profile scandal, the company will formally dissolve, and this is according to an email that was sent to shareholders. And Theranos will seek to pay unsecured creditors its remaining cash in the coming months, and the move comes after federal prosecutors filed criminal charges against Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes and the blood testing company's former number 2 executive. Now, they are alleged that they defrauded investors out of hundreds of millions of dollars and also defrauded doctors and patients as well. It is expected that the top investors in that fraud are expected to lose a combined total of $1 billion. Like what happened in the New Mexico case last week, expect the same path to follow. The Los Angeles District County Attorney on Tuesday declined to file sexual assault charges against actors. The office had received investigations on each of the actors from various local police agencies, and in the case of Spacey and Siegel, the charges were not filed due to the Statute of Limitations Act. Really. In Anderson's case, the victim refused to cooperate with investigators, according to the DA's office, and the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department investigated a claim that Spacey committed forcible sodomy in October of 1992, and the allegation was too old to bring charges, according to the DA. And in the Steven Seagal case, a woman alleged that the actor had sexually assaulted her back in 1993, and the Beverly Hills Police Department took a report and forwarded it to the DA, though the statute of limitations has expired in 1999. The LAPD investigating an allegation that the Blackish star Anderson had also sexually assaulted a woman earlier this spring. Facebook has been highlighted a number of times in this show, and it seems times are changing. After it was accused of censorship and was hammered by privacy scandals, a new study has now found out that 1 in 4 Americans have deleted the app from their phones altogether, and among young people this number is even higher. Now, a new poll by a research company has found that most Americans are curbing their Facebook usage, and pollsters surveyed over 4,500 US adults earlier this summer and found that 74% of users have taken some action to reduce their dependence on the Facebook page. Some 54% have adjusted their privacy setting, and 42% have taken a break from Facebook for several weeks or more. 26% have deleted the app from the phone entirely, and the numbers are more striking given that among the users aged 18 to 29, 44% of those age group have deleted the app altogether. Now you know why we set up the MeWe. Now, here's another example of, we warned about this a while back. That was in the Intel section. Now, making mainstream media news, A woman was charged £36,000, which is roughly $45,000, for an £18,000 car because of a so-called glitch. It's not a glitch. It's deliberate. That saw thousands of people being charged twice for credit card payments. Now, Francesca Brady and her mother bought the car on August the 29th, the day the error occurred due to an issue with a card terminal run by a group called CardNet. Now, they were left thousands of pounds overdrawn over the weekend. It always happens on a Friday, because then they collect money, and until Mercedes reimbursed them. The Lloyds banking group said all affected customers have been refunded. Now, just under 5% of card debt machine transactions were affected on part of the 29th of August. 5%. And money came out of thousands of people's bank accounts twice, but transactions only showed up once on many shop, pub and restaurant receipts. Miss Brady said she only realised about the double charge when her mother rang from America on August the 31st, 2 days after they bought the card. You must check all statements. I know it takes time and it's an inconvenience, but these clowns are doing it deliberately. It's not a glitch. It's deliberate because they have very little cash available. We keep warning of it. I would check your statements online every week here on in. Double charging on all kinds of items. With your money, they never give you back the interest. It's your money that they're stealing, and your time to correct it. So, be aware. How are we doing? Yeah, we're okay. The son of a Boston police captain this week has been sentenced to 20 years in prison for planning a terror attack, and the FBI described Alexander Sicolo as a committed soldier of the Islamic State terror group. Oh my, Obama's boys are going down big time now. He was first arrested back in 2015 after his father alerted authorities over concerns about his son, and prosecutors said Sicolo was planning to attack a campus with explosives. It's 2 stories tonight where they're targeting schools. His lawyers had argued that he had mental health issues, and the plan was poorly thought out. Like that makes a difference. In a statement released after his sentencing, prosecutors said Sicolo had used the alias Ali al-Amriki online and had heeded the call of the Islamic State terror group to commit a mass casualty attack. His plan involved using pressure cooker devices filled with nails and ball bearings, similar to the ones used in the Boston Marathon attack. Oh my. A number of firearms and petrol bombs were also found in his apartment after his arrest. Another one bites the dust. The world's second biggest gold consumer continues to replenish its bullion reserves. The Reserve Bank of India report showed today, and at the same time New Delhi is slowly but surely reducing its share of US debt bonds. This is following Russia and China and many other countries. They're ditching them, and if certain people don't act quickly, it's going to pay a heavy price for the people, but we'll see how that goes. Now, the annual report from the Indian financial regulator reveals that the country followed other BRICS partners in adding physical gold to its foreign exchange reserves and the RBI reportedly bought 8.5 metric tonnes of gold during the fiscal year ending in March. Now, this is the first time the RBI has purchased gold in nearly a decade, and the regulator acquired 200 metric tonnes of the precious metal back in 2009, shortly after the global financial crisis. So India following Russia and China into dumping US debt bonds. This is something that could be interesting in the coming weeks, of what it contains, and maybe a pointer is to think how things are going forward. The chairman of the US House of Representatives Committee, who is charged with drafting the next chapter of tax legislation, informally called Tax Reform 2.0, said today that he would release a draft of the bill next week and expects a full chamber vote on it by October the 1st, day after the budget. Republican lawmakers are eager to push forward on the legislation intended to make permanent tax cuts for individuals and most business owners and build on last year's tax overhaul. Take note. US Wheat Associates has announced the closing of its Moscow office on October the 1st due to a lack of demand for American wheat in Russia. Almost 100 years since that took place, when they stole all the Russian wheat and dumped it in the American market and put all the US wheat farmers out of business. Now, since 2016, Russia has been the global leader in grain exports, with much more public information available about Russia's wheat supply. We believe it's time to end our mission there and continue allocating more resources in markets where our export volume is growing. This according to the USW Vice President of Overseas Operations, Mark Fowler. Now, according to him, Russian wheat is obviously very competitive in certain markets, but it is important to point out that our marketing and technical teams based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands and Casablanca, Morocco, will continue competing for export business in the Middle East and also North Africa. Now, in 2016, Russia became the world leader in wheat exports, and since the early 2000s, its share of the world wheat market has quadrupled. Russia's agricultural exports have surged by almost a third in the first 5 months of 2018, so much for sanctions, and the country exported 29.5% more agriculture and food products, worth $9.5 billion, than in the same period last year. See, this is why sanctions don't work in Russia. It just doesn't. For the simple reason they have every single resource. They're the only country that has every single resource. This is why it gets targeted, because it can be independent, and the system doesn't like independence, as we all know. Now, the export of wheat through May surged to 17.1 million tonnes, which is worth $3.1 billion. Now, this has been rumbling this week, and it could actually go in the Intel, but it'll be the final news piece before we go into a music break. And a number of top US officials have denied that they are the author of a damning anonymous editorial that attacks President Trump this week. The New York Times article, said to be written by a senior White House official, says Mr. Trump's appointees are trying to stifle his agenda, and there is fierce speculation of who is responsible, with the Vice President among those to deny any involvement. Trump went on to describe the writer as gutless and a newspaper as phony. And Mr. Pence has dismissed claims that he wrote the op-ed, and the Vice President puts his name on the op-eds, tweeted Yaron Agin, Mr. Pence's Communications Director and Deputy Chief of Staff. The New York Times should be ashamed, and so should the person who wrote the false, illogical and gutless op-ed. Our office is above such amateur acts. Really. Now, the theory that Mr. Pence wrote the article largely stems from the use of the word lodestar, Lodestar, a term meaning a star that leads or guides, and one which the Vice President has frequently used. In a New York Times piece published on Wednesday, the author refers to the late Republican Senator John McStain as a lodestar for restoring honour to public life and our national dialogue. I'd like to remind people of something I said back on August the 9th that might bring this piece to more light. Now, this was in relation to Ecuador and Julian Assange. Quote, "The most disturbing aspect of it is Mike Pence, the Vice President, is also involved with the Democrats, and he made a visit to Ecuador recently. Why did he go? And what was his purpose? And also, more importantly, was he promised something by the Democrats? I want to make it clear, the next part is me speculating, but it does look like the Democrats offered Pence a deal to become president if he plays along, and Trump is impeached and fired based on blackmailed evidence given by Assange."